Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cohesion Podcast. Today I'm joined by Rachel Happe, founder of Engaged Organizations. She is a strategist who works at the intersection of technology, governance, leadership, communications. She's also a sought-after speaker, was named a 2023 Top 50 Remote Work Advocate by Mobius Software. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shawn. It's great to be here.
Oh boy, I'm excited. We've been able to chat a little bit before we got going, and I know that we've got lots to talk about. But before we get too far, I have some I hesitate to call these rapid fire or even super personal questions. I'm sure that we'll get some more personal and personality as we go through, but I've got 5 of them for you.
Okay.
First one being, what's an insult that you've received that you're proud of?
The one that sticks in my head, it's probably not the one I should be most proud of, but it describes me pretty effectively. When I was in my 20s, I worked in a management consulting firm, and we had just finished this big senior staff meeting.
Okay.
And we were having lunch in the cafeteria at our client, and one of the directors turns to me and he's like, "You're like a truck driver in a sweater." And it was absolutely the funniest thing. And I think it describes me because I am pretty good at using plain language to describe complex ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I get passionate. So some of the time, and I grew up in Boston, so I can let loose a little bit on the language, which is what triggered the comment at the time. I'm usually pretty well behaved. My husband was very impressed that when my daughter was little, I managed for like 5 years not to really swear much in front of her. That's time is now passed, but I'm not sure I'm proud of it, but it was very descriptive in hindsight.
What are the top 5 most opened apps on your phone?
So I have a family, so messaging, the carpool text chat is very active, not surprisingly. I was thinking about this and I was like, Twitter used to be, because I was a big Twitter user. And one of the reasons I really liked Twitter was because I never stopped thinking. Like I'm always chewing on something. And not everybody wants to hear it. They're in the middle of their own thing. And so Twitter really allowed me to just let loose. And the environment was such that you could completely ignore me. Like, it was up to you whether you wanted that fire hose or not. I haven't really found an alternative. I'm on Threads a lot, but it's not like
I know.
Mixing worlds. LinkedIn is not that. So TBD on that. Instagram is a big one for me. I use it a little differently than most people. I have a private account. I use it sort of as a diary because I'm very busy. So I don't get to like write or jot down things.
Yeah.
And I use it for mindfulness. So I can go back and be like, my life's pretty awesome. I mean, but I take pictures of like little moments in my day that bring me joy so that I can remember that there are little moments in my life every day.
Do you still write? Do you still write descriptions if it's just for you?
I do,
or you just
here
take
and
the
there.
picture?
I don't cultivate. I'm not looking for likes or follows or whatever. I'm not a public persona in that way on Instagram. One thing that I've picked up recently, and it's interesting. It's this game called Dots. It's a challenge logic game.
Yeah.
And I sort of did it because I had maxed out on media. And I was like, I need to find something to keep me busy that is not drama. And what's been interesting about that is it just keeps going on and on and on, different challenges. It's like different puzzles. And I found out like it really reinforced for me that I am motivated by challenge. Like, that is my thing. Like, I don't need praise. I don't need, like, there's a lot of things that don't, but like, I like a hard problem, for better or for worse. And
Yeah.
then Pinterest is the last one because I'm kind of a voracious
Oh,
learner. Like, I self-taught myself to watercolor during the pandemic, or bake, or garden, or like all of those. I do a lot of like my own reno and things like that. So I use Pinterest to just collect ideas.
Pinterest is awesome. I was on Pinterest for so much for a period of time, and now it's like looking at tattoo designs, or it's something, I don't know, more artistic. But I love that you use it like that. Well, you in your career, you listen, you analyze, you learn a lot about people and the way they interact with each other. What's the most common myth about your field of expertise?
I think the most common myth, and it has to do with the title of the book I'm writing, but it's that we are in control.
Mm.
And that the corollary there is that if we are successful, we must be in control or right.
Mm.
Meaning we believe that there's some order to the universe, that when we are deserving, we will do better.
Right?
And I was writing about this recently, and popped into my head, my step grandmother was this old blue-blooded New England lady from like she went to college in the 30s, so she's older generation. And she used to sort of sardonically and sort of not say, you shouldn't marry for money, but marry where money is. So she kind of recognized that you're not going to be able to control everything, but if you put yourself in the right environment, your chances are better. And it just crystallized that for me, because I see a lot of logical fallacies going on with people, which is they're like, I have money, I'm a CEO, I'm a whatever, I must be right. And you're like, maybe
Yeah.
not.
Oh my gosh, I love your grandmother's analogy. I'll say that a lot when like you control people, like you control the weather. But with your grandma's analogy, it's like, well, I could move to Hawaii at least, so I know what the
Right.
weather's gonna be like.
Right.
Yeah, so I know
You
in
can't even
general.
completely control yourself is the
No,
problem.
no,
You know,
no.
like, so, I think that's a fallacy that it's not just people, but in our narratives,
Yeah,
we ascribe kind of responsibility or accountability in that way. And it doesn't always play. I have millions of people I could ask in hundreds of countries around the world that are not doing so well, whether they think that's true, and they would say no.
yeah, yeah. Well, if I start to believe my own stories, that I tell myself we're in big trouble. We're in big trouble.
Yeah, it's just all you have to do is know that like life is fragile, and bring that to the table with you every time you think you are the one to know
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. I'm successful. I must be smart. What's the most impactful media you've read or watched or listened to this year?
So I have two, and they're somewhat related, and they're about the attention economy. And the first one was a long, I think he's on Substack. Ed Zitron wrote an article called "They're Looting the Internet."
Mm.
And it's funny because at the beginning of the internet, I was like, it's gonna like everybody was like super hyped about social media, and I'm like, it's
Right.
gonna revert. Like power always reverts to power. Well, like once this but it's the coda to some of what's going on right now. And then the other thing I've been reading at the same time, which is I read interesting things at the same time, and the echoes are interesting. So I've been reading Jenny Odell's book, How to Do Nothing.
Mm.
And that's a more philosophical take on it.
Yeah.
But both are quite interesting.
No, love it. Well, okay, let's jump into I guess your career. I mentioned earlier you're being an analyst, being an observer, being a listener, but tell us what got you to where you are right now. So, yeah, let's start beginning of time all the way to engage organizations.
Okay, the beginning of time, the most interesting things about that, and I will be brief, are both sets of grandparents were family farmers in the Midwest. Both parents were ministers. So
Oh,
I
wow.
have no family history of going to work and coming home.
Mm,
Like there was no boundaries there. Like work and life were the same.
all the same.
I mean, there were some like there were events that happened that you went and worked and versus whatever, but um, there wasn't a clean line. And that also meant I grew up in communities that were pretty high functioning because everybody was doing the same thing. They were like blending what was going on. So that's the beginning of time piece. The career piece is much more opportunistic. And at the time, one hop to the next seemed kind of random. I was
Hmm.
following what interested me, not planning a career per se. Um, but I will say they all circle on the way people behave, power, control, ideas and innovation, meaning like what that creativity piece, and design. Like, how can we design things so that this will work for people, control, power, etc.
Well, so do we, your role as a digital workplace organization, your role as a digital workplace organization community strategist, tell us more about what that means. And selfishly, I'm super interested in the community aspect of that. If you can go into more detail about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tough that I ended up here because I know I used to know a little about a lot of things. Now I know a lot about a lot of things, and so I've been a product manager. I've worked in done a lot of L&D work. I've done a lot of leadership work. I've done a lot of analytical work. So I'm kind of a metrics specialist too, although that's not like what I lead with because for me, metrics is a means to
Hmm.
check
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah,
not
yeah.
the sole reason. Um, and I really understand human systems and power. Like I used to sit in my dad's deacons meetings when I was like 6 or 7. I have no
Oh,
idea what they were
wow.
talking about. I don't think I cared. But the social dynamics, I was fascinated by like like movement, like how people were like negotiating, getting what they wanted. So that's always just fascinated me. Um,
You you could sense that when you were 7, when you're like in those meetings.
that really is what fascinates me is just watching how people interact and be like,
Oh,
how do you think this is going to end up? And I studied international relations in college, which was all about power, right? It wasn't
yeah.
domestic politics. It was like, how do you negotiate that power? So um, that's really at the heart of it. And then you talk about the digital workplace, and people think it's constrained to the superficial. Again, we think we have control over this. If we just design a workflow, we're done.
Everything will be fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how people work.
Mm-mm.
It'll be fine if it aligns with all the power dynamics, but that will
Yeah.
change as soon as you add a new person to the team or like, so, you know, uh, it's not that static. And at the same time, we're spending less and less money training and giving managers groups of people that they can actually really connect and build relationships with.
Yeah.
So all the managers who should be helping others navigate all of those dynamics don't have the time either, because they don't have budget for reflection or discussion or patience or any of those things that people need. So it's a deceptively complex thing to do well, and most people who work in the space, especially like on the digital transformation side of things, they're like, well, if we just have the systems and design the right workflow, and our job is done. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, have at it. Go forth.
Reflection, discussion, and patience. That's so great. Like they don't have budget for reflection, discussion, and patience in order to. Yeah, that's fascinating because when you talk about power and then you talk about those two things together, my mind immediately goes to the like power. I guess question is power going to exist no matter what? And does it depend on I don't know, like are we looking for noble leaders, or is it we're thinking about it the wrong way because power oftentimes pushes aside the patience, the reflection, and the discussion.
So here's my take on the whole thing. And it took a bizarrely long time to see this. And then once I saw it, I was like, of course, that's the problem.
Yeah.
In our organizations, we have mechanistic and financial systems, and we have a human system. We manage it all like it's a mechanistic system. And so the reason everybody's frustrated at work is we're like, well, it's a supply chain. It should be logical and linear, and we should be able to control it, and we should get like standardized parts. And I'm like, have you ever been able to predict anything that anyone on your team is going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. Mm-hmm. Unless they're just beat down and they're like, I'm just doing my thing because. Right. And that's not actually what you want, because that's a very disengaged person. And one of the mistakes people make is they're quiet. Everything's great. When somebody's quiet to me, I'm like, something is not right. Like something's going on. And like it makes me very nervous when people won't talk to me, because I'm like, that there's something it may not be me, but there is something causing them to not feel okay about saying whatever's on their mind.
Right. Because they're not a cog, I guess. I mean, it's so cliche to say, I'm not a cog in a machine. I'm not just a machine. They're not just machines. But
when you flip it though, and come from that workflow perspective and that logical, I'm just going to design this workflow.
Right.
And then you're like, well, if people aren't cogs, how do you think that's going to happen?
Oh, yeah.
You just decided how 500 people are going to do their jobs.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to tell them how to do their jobs.
That's where we see the lip service. Well, executives seem to get it. There's lots of literature around this. There's lots of talk around this, and a lot of the professional development or the manager training is about people. You're our most important aspect. We want you to feel engaged. And there's lots of evidence that highly engaged employees just perform better. They make more money for a company, so they know all of this. And yet, you'd run into this. Here's your workflow. Do what I tell you to do. And even those moments of, it's almost like when some CEOs or execs, when they regress, or when they're under stress, they regress, and they regress to this like, do what I tell you to do, no matter what, which is like the opposite of what they want in the end. You write about toxicity in the workplace. Is that where this basically lies, or there's this plus other things that create this toxicity?
So I think what I think is going on, I've often said that like denial is our national pastime in America. right? Like, we like to say a lot of things.
Yeah,
What we
tell me
do
more.
is not actually any of those. In the workplace, you get an added reinforcement for denial, which is this. People are not on the balance sheet as assets, only liabilities. So if you think about the implications of that, the more skill I have, the faster I do something, the bigger the liability I am. The more likely I am to get laid off. Because at the end of the day, executives are managing the organization, senior executives are managing the organizations by their spreadsheets. If, on the other hand, knowledge and trust, social skills was quantified as an asset of your employees, we would have to pair we would have to rationalize who has skill and who doesn't.
Right.
But because we don't do that, it's easy to ignore, right? And it's not that people's intent is to screw employees, but it's ephemeral when I have very specific numbers in front of me. And because I don't have specific numbers in front of me, for example, if people were assets on the balance sheet, HR would not be a cost center.
That's true.
Right? And so then I could invest to improve people's skill, and it wouldn't be increasing risk to the organization. And so that is the biggest nut of the problem. And if you really want to blow your mind, there's a book by Caitlin Rosenthal called Accounting for Slavery. Well, people used to be on the asset side of the balance sheet when we owned them. And then we didn't own them anymore, and we just wiped that out and forgot about it.
That is super complex. You know, before you said that last little bit about the book, I really all I wanted to know is how do we fix this? And now that you've said that about the book, my brain, you're right.
That's how we fix it. Ultimately, that is how we fix it. And actually, it's funny because for years I've been like mulling on and actually a lot of the work I was doing in community was calculating the value of community.
Yeah.
Right. What is the value of,
right? How are you going to calculate that? I mean, actually, within an organization.
I have an ROI model for that. But I got back to the bigger organizational balance sheet issues. And one morning I was doing something and I was like, why do I keep beating my head against a brick wall here? Like, everybody's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's impossible. That's not like, I've had this conversation with accounting experts and they're like, it's too complicated. And I'm like, yeah, but we amortize software. What the heck is that? Like, of course you have to make assumptions, right? Like, it's not ever going to be clean because whatever. And I was like, why do I keep doing that? And I was like, oh. And the O was I interned back when I was in college for a family friend who was a healthcare economist who changed the way Medicare and Medicaid reimbursed for healthcare procedures. Before that, there had been no rationalization to how doctors got reimbursed. None.
Oh, interesting.
It's just whatever the market
will bear. Whatever the market would bear.
Right. So, and because it's an unknowable, how do you judge the quality? Like, if you're a random patient, like,
it'd be like guessing, like maybe I'll get reimbursed.
I have no idea. Right. So, so I was just helping process, but he was doing a big benchmarking study, collecting all of this data. And I went back and I looked at it, and he had included in there emotional stress, time for reflection. Right. And I had that in the back of my mind. And of course, I went and had lunch with him to pick his brain. He's in his 90s now. He's very old, but he's a brilliant guy. And then I did a little more digging, and somebody at a bank in Finland, I believe, Scandia Bank,
Okay.
had done a calculation and included it into their spreadsheets. So it is possible, but it's a systemic problem, right? Like one company they can do it internally, but it won't matter externally for a public company until the financial world metrics change, so our standards change. But that's the heart of it. That's how you fix everything. There's other things you can do at other levels to improve things.
Well, you've got that. Yeah, you've got the ROI. You've been able to see this stuff. There's ways to measure it. I guess I'm wondering, in your experience, you've worked with a lot of executives, worked with a lot of companies, and being able to present this stuff for people that are listening, that are within this world, they're within HR, or they're leaders, or they're executives. How do you approach somebody that when they are under stress, they regress to this, like people are liabilities, like immediately type of thing? How do you work with somebody? Because you're right, I understand it has to be more systemic, but how do we start to do that at the company by company level, so, at least to try to make that change?
That's why I was studying online communities.
Okay.
Because I wanted to understand what was success, what was the impact of the success, and really, like, what I was after were two things: a financial ROI model,
right,
and I wanted, this is not quite the right, it's how I thought about it, but it's not the right term, but I wanted to know the half-life of, like, when do communities get to financial zero, and how can you project their financial growth, their growth in general, but the financial growth of them. Yeah. And once I had done that at the community roundtable, I stayed for another couple of years, but I'm like, I did what I came to do here. Now I want to go, like, do the next thing. But what I will say is, in communities, it's all about engagement rates. That's how people think about success. Are people engaged? Right. And so every organization is a community as well. It's a community of employees, and probably it's an ecosystem of communities, right? It's not just one, it's one, but nested communities. It's a network. And there used to be this idea that you were inactive, you were active, or you were in like proactively engaged.
Right.
And what I started doing is breaking that down. So like some of the research, I now have like an engagement framework, because I'm like, all engagement is not the same, and it doesn't have the same value. Yeah. Certainly inactive has no value. Active and just absorbing does have value. People are learning, but it's not contributing new knowledge into the ego. Yeah. So I tried to parse that out. And then I was looking, because we were studying communities that were being used for a lot of different business objectives. Yeah. I was looking for a generalized ROI model rather than a very specific for customer support or internal knowledge management or like whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, so the fractal, the pattern that's true of every community is it thrives off of people getting answers. So it's a question and an answer, right? And so I started collecting data on the value of the answers, the average value of an answer in different kinds of communities, and the volume of questions and answers, right? And from there, you can get, and so the thing that most executives don't understand about communities, even online communities, is you have this workflow. If you diagram it out, it has, 20 big questions between the beginning and the end.
Yep.
If you go online and ask those questions, you can improve the cycle time of that workflow, but it's somewhat marginal, meaning executives know how hard it is to change people's behaviors or like whatever. And so they're like,
Right.
does this really matter? And I'm like, but what they're not seeing is with online communities, once you have the answer captured, if it's seen by 10 more people that didn't even have to ask the question, it's 10 times the value, right? And so I call that the networked value of an answer, right? You had the initial value, and then you had the observable value.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at this and saying, the value of an answer is how it's realized in a workflow.
Yeah.
How much time can you save by having the right answer?
That's right.
Or a better answer.
Yeah.
And then I had a very smart client who had a new community, Heather Osmus, and she had been there for a year. And so some communities never get off the ground. Like they're always just communications channels, and they don't have, but because she knew what she was doing, that was not the case with this one. And we did a project where we projected out 3 curves of how that community was going to grow based on the year of growth she had. So we did aggressive, we did conservative, and we did like projected.
Yeah, yeah.
She calculated actual to projected for 2 more years. At the end of that time, it was bang on the middle curve.
Huh. Is that because, well, so when you mention, this is mind blowing to me, that the definition of community that you brought up, very simple one, of the people go there to ask questions and they get their questions answered. And I'm even thinking about that outside of work. Like I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I'm part of a trail running community.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what we do. We go out, hey, where am I going to go this week? Can somebody recommend better shoes for me? And there's that back and forth. And that more questions doesn't mean that it's working better necessarily, because the answers were already there, and that's where you're getting the big result from it. So you need complicated. Your ROI, this makes so much sense, but your ROI cannot just be lots of people are asking questions. Yeah. It has to be lots of people are getting answers.
Well, if lots of people, so here's the thing, the questions are the most important part. Okay. But if answers aren't coming, people will leave.
They're gone.
Yeah. Right. So you can assume that if people are getting answers,
then it's just an echo.
Questions or have questions. And it's not even all the verbalized questions, right? Like I think of growing up in a church. You didn't have an articulated question like, what is the meaning of life? Like you didn't walk into church.
Like you knew, don't ask that question. That's going to be.
So there's a lot going on in communities that isn't just the question and the answer.
Yeah.
But that's really the consistent thing across communities.
So you'd said communities then, and the way they sort of like, I think about it almost like it's like we're organizing. It's like, the proletariat uprising. Like the community then impacts or affects the leadership in an organization so that it's not, hey, I'm just I'm actually an asset, or we're actually assets instead.
Well, so like what it does, it's totally like for executives today, you could change none of the governance. And you'll get so much more value out of an online community, meaning it can do so much more because it's not throttled by all the controls, right? You've connected across groups, and now you don't have like 100 employees across the globe solving the same problem again and again and again, right? Like, so that you don't even need to solve the big problems to get value out of it.
Cool.
That's sort of separate, but it's
this naturally leads for me, and I wish it didn't, because I'm kind of tired of talking about it, because it's either freaks me out or I think it's overhyped, but it leads to AI. And especially in the case of in the case of community, is it helpful in the case of community? Is it risky in the case of community? And what are those two things? Well, and in the case of an executive going, hey, do I need
Did
you?
you know why it's not risky to humans?
Why?
Because we still have this mechanistic system and the human system, and we're still treating humans like machines, right? So I wrote a post a while back because I was getting really annoyed reading AI about how AI could help employees. And it was all like, it can do these 10 tasks for you. And I'm like, if that's all we are, like, we should go home. Like, let AI work with AI, and they can keep doing tasks, and it'll be fabulous, whatever.
I'll take a nap.
But it's the mindset of what we think employees or people's value is, right? Again, back to the slave plantation, which is how our organizations are structured and how our mindsets are structured. But the example I use in presentations is diamonds. I'm like, why are diamonds valuable? They're rocks. I have a zillion of them.
They're rocks.
I can find a lot of rocks. Why are these rocks really valuable? De Beers made them mean something. You know who can't make something mean something to somebody else? AI.
Yeah.
Right? So the value of people is activating other people, and value is meaning, right? Value is not that I have 1,000 diamonds. If I have no market for 1,000 diamonds,
it doesn't
I don't
anything.
got nothing, right? And so because we manage our organizations like mechanistic systems, again, back to, we must be wildly successful. We have all of this stuff. I'm like, did anybody read it? Do they care? Did they do anything with it? And so, like, I go back to it. I was doing some advisory work at one of the biggest consumer packaged goods companies in the world, early when I was at the CR. And I was sitting there, and this guy I was working with some IT people, and my client was like, yeah, we went and we did this audit of all our intranet pages, and there were like a whole bunch that hadn't been looked at in months, maybe years. And so we deleted 60,000 pages.
Yeah.
No one noticed.
No.
And so, like, you swing back to the individual employee perspective of that. Who's not drowning in content? Right?
That's true.
One of the things I do with my clients, literally, I draft and edit and shape what they're sending out, because everybody, like, we're so obsessed with productive meetings and like being, like, having the perfect message, and like that we just create volume. I do it. I like, it's a human nature.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no one's reading that. Like, we're drowning in information and channels. Like, if you can't answer one little like thing quickly for them and emotionally, then it doesn't matter. Nobody's looking at that stuff, even if it's brilliant.
We get caught up. Well, I find I'm going to say, I say we, like I know, like, but I think we also get all caught up into that, where we view ourselves not as we view ourselves as the witches. Like creating content makes me feel like I'm earning my paycheck, whether or not the content's going to do anything or not. And so, because if you went to that group of people before you sort of sunsetted all of that content and said, "Hey, is this okay to get rid of?"
It's
There
a
would have been
no.
an uprising. No, don't get rid of that. No, don't
So
get
I
rid of
have
that
an
because that.
example of that.
Yeah.
I did a internal community strategy for Steelcase, the office furniture company, and they had the opportunity to do an analytics project with one of the local universities. And they looked at successful and unsuccessful projects. And what they found is on the successful ones, they started off with a lot of questions, and the questions really phased out very quickly towards the end. The unsuccessful projects, the ones with a bias towards action, we got to get something done, had very few questions at the beginning, and those questions escalated quite dramatically by the end of the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because when you're more junior, don't have as much confidence in your expertise, you want to demonstrate that you're earning your keep. So you need to show that you're doing your job.
Yeah.
But if that problem's already been solved and you don't solve it well, like you're just creating more work. We do that again and again and again and again and again in organizations.
Yeah.
Because that is what's rewarded. That is like output, because we think humans are mechanisms of production, not meaning.
That's like he's like digging holes. Like you said, like it just is it's not getting us the results that we want. Like somebody digs a hole in my backyard and then I say, "Oh, well, I want to be busy." They filled in the hole, and then I go out there and I dig the hole. And maybe I dig it as well as they did. Maybe I don't, but it's another hole. I dig that again and again. That reminds me of I don't know why. I think it's Ghostbusters. At a certain point before they get any ghosts, and there's the receptionist, he's like, "Do something, will you? We're paying for this."
Yeah.
She's just sitting there doing her nails or whatever, but there's nothing to do. You've made me really think about this on an individual level. Like understand, I don't want to be too frou-frou or lied about this, but really understanding your worth as a human being, like as a human contributing to a company, not as a I really know how to check my email contributing to a company.
And also, you don't control your email.
No.
It doesn't align with your priorities, I can guarantee you. So there's a great quote that ever since I've heard it, I think about a lot, which is, it's from Annie Dillard, and it's, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives."
We are going to be great friends now that you quoted Annie Dillard. That is amazing. I love Annie Dillard. I just reread her Eclipse essay. Oh my gosh, you're great. That's wonderful.
Anyways, so like I'm going to circle back to the executive.
Mm-hmm.
Executives are in denial. And what they're doing is managing by spreadsheets. And again, not their fault. They're in the system too. Like they're in a structure that incentivizes this. But they are so used to socializing the costs and consolidating the gains that they tell people, "Oh, just return to the office," not understanding that, like, I did a back of the napkin stupid calculation. It costs like 25% of somebody's compensation to get to the office every day.
I know.
Like, that's not like think through that, right? Like, or like, what's another? Oh, or they'll be like, I want you to be back in the office because we need to build relationships. Well, who gets stuck doing all the crap work of building relationships? Usually the women, usually the Black women, right? Like whoever's lowest on the power totem pole, right? get stuck with all of that stuff. Well, if you value it, invest in it. Pay somebody to do that. And then it doesn't matter if you're in the office or online. You have a community manager, or you have like whatever you want to call it, like social guru. I don't know. But like, make that somebody's job if it matters. Don't ask. And I hate in the IT space, we're like, oh, get some super fans to like do adoption. And I'm like, that's their discretionary time. If it's worth it, pay them. I had a client actually once who paid rising experts in the organization to be community managers for communities of practice. And it was on their professional development, and they got dispensation. They got hourly billing dispensation for that on a weekly basis. That is how you do it.
I'm in this trap. I don't know if you end up in the same one. And I've kind of mentioned this before, where I feel like I've got to be doing something. I got to be doing something. I got to be doing something. And instead of the actual human connections. And it's funny that you bring up sort of lowest on the totem pole ends up being the people who understand that the best. And like the CEOs know they understand that the best. And that is probably one of the most valuable things within the organization. You're right. I mean, pay them so that we can be successful in this. Like, it's so important.
Yeah, it is fascinating to me. It's like essential workers during the pandemic. I'm like, if they're essential, why don't they have health care?
That is so hard and complicated, especially right now. Do you get frustrated about this a lot? Sort of the drum that you're beating and what the change that you're trying to affect, or are you really optimistic about the future with where we're headed on I guess valuing humans? I don't want to sound horrible about saying, but just valuing people as people.
I go back and forth. The most there are organizations I work with who are the acknowledged experts in their fields. They're the ones people look up to. They tend to operate truly around the humans. They're very coherent. Their values show up in the daily interactions, right? Like, you can draw a straight line between those two things. They are amazing and very few and far between. And what's true of humans is over-governing them is not the right answer, right? Like, my book is called Control is for Amateurs for a reason, right? Control is for like systems that you don't want a plane falling out of the air. That's really good. I like control in that domain. But for people, it just shuts them down. Like, and so you get average out of people. And people are amazed. Like, they can, like, if you truly reward and enable somebody, they will do things you cannot predict, but are absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I am frustrated, on the other hand, that Jack Welch seems to have won this is how we manage large organizations.
Yeah.
And they're just financial instruments. They're not product companies. No, we're just like whatever. And I'm working on this book in part because I'm like, I've learned a lot. I don't know. I've had some amazing clients. Only a handful of them are doing it at a level that matters significantly to the whole organization.
Yeah.
people are frustrated because change initiatives fail all the time, or they succeed for a while and then fail. And I'm like, it's because you haven't changed the fundamental structure of your governance. Like, and until you do, like, you're just wasting a lot of money. You're like moving the chess pieces around, but you're not actually playing chess. You're like a 2-year-old with chess pieces, right? Government is being a lot more innovative right now than the private sector. I don't think they want to hear that.
Yeah.
But it's true. Some of the global nonprofits are being really innovative. So I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm going to write this book. And if I can connect with the people who really want this, then great. And if not, I've done my life's work. I've published it, and somebody can find it in a decade or two. And, you know, I'll go off and bake cookies, or I don't know, do something else. I mean, and it's not that I don't have some clients, but like, it's really hard to get up to a level where people have the influence. And actually, I've done a lot of work with large organizations in Europe because they value humans, right? And so much more of my enterprise work has been for European companies than for American companies. American companies, I tend to go in at a lower level, or I go in with IT as a kind of a change management on the side. But it's not very holistic. It's very like, use this tool.
This will fix everything. Well, you're tapped into like what I think and believe. I mean, community just in general, and it gets overused and talked about, but I wish it would get talked about more, and there were more details around it. Those are the things that help us live longer. Those are the things that help us stay at a company longer. Those are help us to create, like, it's so fundamental to who we are.
Well, you know, the other thing, like these organizations that are excellent.
Yeah.
Communities determine the floor and the ceiling for your expectations of yourself. If you grow up in a community that's really disconnected, unhealthy, not there for you, you can't see, you can't even imagine what you could be. If you're in a community of just excellence and support, your vision for yourself and expectations then create your reality. Like, if you believe you can do something, you probably can.
Yeah. Anything you put your mind to, right, McFly? That's awesome.
Well, it's not just that. Somebody has to validate you. Somebody has to encourage you. Somebody has to kind of get you over those hurt. Like, you need you need that emotional piece that we ignore in organizations. And we don't value the emotional piece. And I'm like, it's all the emotional piece.
Well, how do we find you? How do our listeners find you? How do we stay in track?
Well, I'm at engagedorgs.com is my business address. Rachel at engagedorgs.com. If you want to email me, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know. LinkedIn. You know, if you're motivated enough, you can, and you know how to spell my last name. You can find me.
Yeah, Happe, Happe, as in the good kind of beer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Shawn. It was great to chat.